All right, I'm just going to assume that this is working. Sound is fine. All right, great. All right, well, welcome to ology again, and we took a week off last week. It was a pretty tumultuous week. It was hard to know what to do, really, when it came to just about anything. And this week is a pretty special episode for me. I got a dear friend here, and he's going to join me for Wait, He's Black? Ology. And it took us a while to come up with that title, but I'm pretty happy with it. My friend Vance Gilbert and I have a standing lunch date. We're both very busy musicians, but when we are both home and off the road, we always make it kind of a plan to get together and have lunch and to reconnect. And we've been proactive about this for most of the 20 years that we've known each other. And we have a lot of fun reconnecting. And in fact, Vance was one of the last people I saw before the virus kind of shut everything down and changed everything for good. We had lunch indoors without masks at a Chinese buffet of all places. This kind of shows you how much of a different lifetime it was ago. And we were also, I remember, talking about how excited Vance was to perform on an upcoming cruise that he had been invited on. So, yeah, different times. I called Vance up a couple weeks ago in the wake of the killing of George Floyd, just wanting to reconnect again. And we couldn't have lunch, so we decided to play tennis. And I didn't even know that Vance played tennis, but he does. And he's great. And it was wonderful to connect. We had some pretty powerful conversations about racism and about some of his personal experiences. And I thought it could be helpful in some small way to kind of revisit this conversation in a more public forum. I'll be honest, I'm a little concerned that I'm going to say something stupid, or even worse, that I'm going to say something at all when I should instead be listening. But I think it's important for white people to choose to have these conversations. I think it speaks pretty much that white people can even choose to have these conversations about race. Speaks to a level of privilege that I'm really uncomfortable with, because for people of color, it's not really a choice that they can make. This is Alistair Moop texting me to see if I want to play tennis. Lots of folk singers and tennis. So we're going to have this conversation. I'm going to bring Vance in very shortly. As a caveat, like literally every conversation I've ever had with Vance Gilbert, I never know quite where it's going to go, and that's part of the charm. So I have no idea what's about to happen, and I can't wait, and it's always great to talk to him. So let me see if I can find him here. He was one of the first people to join. There he is, and if I click on him, requests, Vance, there we go. Add. Okay. There we go. We did it. Can you hear me?
Hey.
Oh, there's a nice delay.
But it wouldn't let me do it on the computer. Yeah, but I got to do this by the phone.
Oh, yep.
Thank you, Bob. Oh, my gosh.
Look at this.
We got to kill a feed here. Yep. Somebody's feed has to die.
Oh, yeah. Is it on the computer as well? Look at this.
All right. We got to kill a feed. All right.
Oh, yeah. Is it on the computer as well?
Yes.
Look at this.
Is that too much of me?
It might be. How could we ever have too much of you? But they're really bad.
Oh, you're
echo.
You're pandering already. Black. I'm black, man. I'm black. Don't do that, man. I'm
Wait.
black.
Wait, you're black?
Right? Right? That's what I'm saying. Oh, don't ask me stuff. Don't don't say anything stupid. And how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good.
I think you fixed the echo. Whatever you did, cleared it up.
I got it on the phone. For some reason, it just wouldn't happen with the computer. Are you on the computer?
I'm on my phone. I didn't even know Instagram was on a computer.
Yeah, I tried to pull this up on the. Oh boy.
I'm sure this is exactly the kind of penetrating conversation that everyone is here for.
This is what they tuned in for. They're not going to question our motivation here because I'm black. Don't question me. I'm black.
I love the zooming technique, man. That's perfect. The production values, you're adding to the production values of ology.
My goodness.
I don't know how long ago this was, certainly in the last couple months, you posted something on Instagram. And I don't know if it was a post or if it was in the comments or what, but it was something, a story about a student that you had, a guitar student, a voice student, performance student. Do you have all of those kinds of students?
All of those, yeah.
All of them. We don't need to name them. I'm not sure what kind of student it was, but you must have been talking about current events, and you related that they said, oh, Vance, I don't even see you as black.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And that was kind of before this. I think that was before this kind of most recent flare up of what we're seeing in the news right now. But it really got me thinking, because as a white person, I was like, okay, I can kind of see maybe on one level what they were expressing, however inelegantly it was expressed. And I think I maybe even commented on this online, that maybe what they meant to say was they don't see you only as black. But your response was really interesting. And do you remember your response?
I don't, off the top of my head. Remember, Mark, I'm about 15 years older than you are, so over time.
I remember something to the effect of what you said was, how is that supposed to make you feel? Because the color of your skin is linked when you're black to this whole history, and this whole there's such a cultural experience and a history of oppression, and then there's slavery, and all this stuff comes in. You use the word diaspora, even, I think, in your response.
I was done for the day. Once I used the word diaspora, I was like, I have no words left, man.
Right? And I think you were saying something to the effect of, if you don't see me as black, then that means you're probably not seeing all these other things, which are such a part of my experience and where I come from and what I have to live with. Is that a fair characterization?
That's a perfect characterization. Let me preface by saying that you and I talk a lot of stuff, but my talking right now is not predicated on me being the answer to anything in particular, really. I mean, it's even for us coming up with this idea of doing what we were doing, is there's a line that you, as a white person, I'm sure you tread, because you don't want to seem like you're pandering to the time and asking me, hey Vance, will you talk to us about the black thing? So there's a whole lot to unpack, and as with any other type of modern human being, I don't tread all of the absolute exact party line when it comes to having this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Let me unpack a little bit of that. One of the things is that there's a lot of talk at this point about how black people shouldn't be held responsible for taking care of white people, and how they're thinking about their position in privilege and such in this world. And I'm not in total agreement with with that idea of, you know what, there's a reading list out there. You need to go read this and that and the other. I think it's very important that people do a certain amount of work on their own, but we remember the story of the blind men and and the elephant. Oh, it's a snake. Oh, it's a serpent. Oh, it's a column. And it wasn't until they put themselves together and figured out that it was the elephant. Well, my argument is, ask the damn elephant. Like, what are you? Like, as fatigued as Black people are with white people tapping on their door in times of stress, wondering what they should be doing, I feel like Black people have a certain responsibility that, even with anecdote like what I have, or what I would be saying to anyone, even with that, it's at least one minor source as to how to get this right. And I was talking about this with my partner, who was a woman, and she happens to be white, but she was speaking from a feminist point of view. And she says to me, Mark, she says, I think a lot of the pushback on this comes from Black women who have been, there's an old image, old racist image of Black women taking care of white people for hundreds of years. The whole, I'm going to say it, the whole subtext of Mammy and
Right.
What am I going to do? I don't know nothing about birthing no babies and all, the stuff that comes out of the movies from that time. And that was actually Butterfly McQueen as a Mammy. But there's a whole point to that. They don't want to be bothered taking care of their white friends in this, but they have enough to deal with. And I take a deep breath with that, and I'm endeavoring to get it. But at the same time, I'm happy to be, for my close friends and not close friends, I'm happy to be something of a resource. Look, I'm 60 plus years old, and the clock is ticking. If I can do something to answer at least the questions that I could potentially answer, then I will have walked on the planet in the way that makes some damn sense. I can't be the salve for white angst. That really is up to y'all. You got to figure that out. But at the same time, I can be there to listen, friend to friend, and as the Black person in the room. That, I think, my job. And I'll do it proudly, because even in the midst of all the prejudice that evolves, all the privilege and lack of reparation and everything else perceived, I do believe in the goodness of people. And I was talking about this with Deborah the other night. I break these things down in my primal brain as what would that person do with you, to you, and for you, and in an apocalyptic situation?
Where would we find one of those now?
What would Mark Aureli do if I was in trouble in some situation or another? I know Mark Aureli would be there. I mean, that's no question.
With both tennis rackets.
Well, of course you would. I know it. You would be swatting away. Even with that little nasty ass two-handed you got.
Hey, man.
Everything you did was burning me the other day, though. I don't have much musculature up on the top, and I never have, and I don't have the stamina that I used to, but my strokes used to be really good. I used to teach this game.
I can tell.
Everything I hit was like, blah, 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 blah. like I wanted to glue the tennis racket to my shoulder rather than have my arms the other day. And
Oh man,
you made that very clear. I was better at the net. I was
the
better,
net looked good.
but man, I had no strokes. I was floppy, and gosh, boy, that doesn't sound like I'm talking about tennis anymore.
Well, you know what's interesting. You said something before that I wanted to circle back to, which was, um, this kind of role that sometimes Black people are forced into is kind of like like racism docent. Like walking white people through. Like this is how bad it is, and why it's been that bad. And honestly, I can 110% imagine why someone would be tired of doing that. And I'm glad that you still have a little mental bandwidth for that. And you also were talking about uh, being older than me. Like one of the things that I think is important to remember is that you've got a slightly different, not that much different, but maybe 15 more years of context here. And so, like an older brother, I can kind of look to you for what does that extra context tell you? How does that help you interpret events in ways that may not occur to me? So, yes, I'm asking you to be on here in part because you are Black. But also, you've been around longer than I have. You've seen more than I have. You have different experiences than me, and I want to get at that kind of stuff too, and that perspective too. I don't want to address just the color thing. It's the context that comes along with it. And that to me is kind of why I'm so grateful that you were willing to do this.
Well, I appreciate you looking at me as a pseudo mentor that way. The truth is that it's a certain amount of survival I've done, and we have to put that into framework as a Black. I have, to be conservatively challenged. People might say, well, how many times have you been called the N-word in your life in an angry setting? Well, enough that I know it hurts. I also know that I know what I don't know. What did I not get as a positive thing or a job or whatever it was because I was Black? Those things I may never know, particularly in... And this is not an allegation to anybody or anything, particularly in the music business. I don't know what I've been hired for. I don't know I don't know what I've been hired for because I was Black. I don't know what I haven't been hired for because I was Black.
That's interesting.
And I'm sure the bulk of it remains somewhere in the middle, that people really want the essence of whatever Vance Gilbert is, but I'm sure on the fringes, those things exist. Now, the fact that they exist in such small numbers, I'm going to venture to say, is irrelevant. And the reason why that is it's not a matter of numbers, but it's a matter of representation. One of the things that I'm going to bring up a very sensitive subject, and it's lynching. Now, lynching has lynching by definition is something that happened after the Emancipation Proclamation, which basically kept people from being chattel and being owned anymore. So if they were still not quite legal citizens, you couldn't just go out and kill them like you would a cow. But lynching, as prevalent as it was between, I think the numbers are, forgive me, between 1870 to 1970, about 100 years worth of lynching, there were documented 4,000+ incidences of lynching. Now, if you do the math, it's not a huge number, but it's enough numbers that when the word gets around that that's something that happens, that's a tool of fear.
Sure.
So you just never, when a tool of fear is wielded like that, like this situation now with Mr. Floyd and his death, looks like a one of, but that's the one of when a camera was rolling. What about things happen when a camera isn't rolling? Or if we start adding these numbers of microaggressions, the tiny racisms, I get off of a stage and I've played my butt off, put on a great set, and people wonder where my hair is after I cut my hair. What? But nobody's going to ask Mark Aureli about his hair.
No.
But it's like, it's one of those. Now that's extreme. Between we got lynching over here, we've got people questioning my hair over here, but it's all based in the idea of race identification,
Sure.
and not based on content of, not even content of character, content of being, content of where have you been. So that's what I bring to the conversation. That's the long answer. I have had things happen to me. Anybody that's interested, put these two words in your Google: Vance Gilbert, United Airlines. I got snatched off of an airplane for a book about airplanes because I had turned to a page of cockpits, be it all that these were planes from the 1930s and they were Polish. But somebody got nervous, called flight attendant, they called the captain, they turned the plane around on the ground and brought it back to the gate where I got questioned. I will venture that would not have happened to Mark Aureli.
No.
And the pushback I got, well, that doesn't sound like racism to me. It sounds like somebody being very careful at a very careful time, the 10-year anniversary. And I'm like, well, it still wouldn't have happened to Mark Aureli. And wouldn't happen to Josh Ritter. But it certainly happened to Tom Prasad Rao. And it did. And it happened to Vance Gilbert. Didn't happen 100 times. All it needs is a couple of times.
As an individual, you're speaking as an individual there. Like, as an individual, you're saying if it happens once or twice to you individually, it's enough to kind of color kind of your life. Is that what you're saying?
Did you say color my life? Is that
poor choice of verb?
See why you gotta be white like that, Mark?
But if you add up, if that's your experience, and then you add up a bunch of other people on either side of you, both contemporarily and throughout history, that's a lot. That's a lot of weight to overcome. That's a lot of context to kind of free oneself from when you're looking at things.
Right.
It's probably too much.
Well, did you say once is too much?
No, I said it's probably too much context to really be to be able to kind of look past it when someone says, oh, that's probably them being careful. Like, how can you look past it when you've got this much happening in your own life and to your peers, and then this much happening throughout history? I don't see how you could really not view something through that lens.
Well, I mean, I think that's exactly one of the points too. Yes, to that question. But you also, as they stack up behind you, and you can't be in my head for it, but I know it when I see it. It's one of those things that sounds amorphous, and some would question as knee-jerk or oversensitive, but You know it when you see it. It's like, remember that old saw, the when people were trying to define porn or
Yeah.
smut art. As I can't describe it, but I know microaggressions and racism, or mesoaggressions even, are things that Black people know for sure. And that brings us back around to all you people out there. When your Black friends say X about something going on, yeah, all we might ask you to do is listen, because it doesn't. Just listen. I don't have any other qualifiers for it. Just listen. There's, there are people out there, of course, that love drama, and it raises their their cost of being, or whatever you want to call it. But it's not worth it. Just listen. Same sensibility when it comes to women in the Me Too movement. If somebody's talking that went down, it's time to listen. It's time to listen. And don't defend. Stop defending. Just listen.
I mean, if you think about it, like, that's what anyone would want, regardless of the color of their skin or their gender. It's like, if you're telling someone, if you're sharing part of your reality, you would want. We're humans. We want to connect. We want to be heard. We want to be witnessed. That to me, it's like, I'm inclined to kind of take people at their word. I mean, what? Yeah, people, like you say, get go over the top, or get dramatic or lie to you or whatever. But like, I think most people are just kind of telling you what they see and calling it like they see it, and I don't know why it's so hard to believe, and to deny someone's experience, but it does seem to be something that we are reckoning with, maybe at this moment, kind of, certainly as much as we ever have, if not maybe a little more.
Well, I think I'd like to try to answer a little bit of that. Hey, Chris, good to see you. I think part of the problem with this is that people are frightened. People. The great equanimity is that Black people and white people get frightened. And when your status, not even a status as privilege, your status as what you thought of yourself as a caring human being, is threatened. Somebody's asked me, what do I think about reparations?
That's my father-in-law.
I'm Black. I think we all need to recognize fear when it comes up, and there's a certain amount of fear that I'm sure my whitest and nicest of friends have, in the fact that, oh my God, have I really been racist all these years? And my response to you as your Black friend is, not racist in all these years. Just, there needs to be some work done, so you recognize my micro diaspora, and so that you recognize yours, so you see why I've had probably to work always a little harder than anybody else to get to be even. Just take the step back from yourself and recognize what that's about. And that's a frightening thing to do. That kind of self-assessment across the board of people, that's some hard shit.
Yeah. I mean, I think at the very least, people can look in the mirror or search themselves and kind of come to a conclusion of being complicit in a system that is racist, if not personally one-on-one race. I mean, everyone seems to be able. People seem to be able to identify the one-on-one racism a lot more easily. When they see that police officer on George Floyd's neck, one-on-one, it looks pretty goddamn racist.
That's right.
And it is, and it was. But the institutional stuff, the systemic stuff, that can be a little harder to see, I think, and I think it's worth calling that stuff out. It's certainly worth it when people of color do it, and it's worth it, I think, when white people point it out as well. I think that's kind of one of the things that's on us, is to recognize the problem, recognize the structural inequality. You can't change it if you deny its existence,
Absolutely. I mean, I think I'm going to misquote who it is. If anybody wants to correct me, please do so. It might have been Julia Bond that said it. It may have been Maynard Jackson. I'm not sure. But one of these black leaders said, we have stepped into it, and this was years ago, it was said, we have stepped into a world where Jim Crow became James Crow Esquire the Third. It's recognizing that having been the case is, my shorthanded black way of saying is that you don't need to wear a hood.
Yeah.
That's not the point. And so many people, particularly when the airline thing came up, I got it, but the later pushback was like, I don't see racism here, and a lot of people really pushing hard, and it was as if they needed a hood. They needed somebody to say, get off because you're black. They don't look at the lineage, the history, the prejudging, the definition of prejudice. All of those things make for a situation that make me wary, and always will.
There's a comment here from our friend Ken Templeton, who writes for Redline Roots. Hey, Ken. That he was talking about the systemic nature of things, I think, where he was saying, it's hard to see that stuff, especially when you benefit from it. And that brings up something that I've always found interesting, and it seems to be at the forefront of the American dialogue right now, because of I don't want to say his name, but our president. It's the notion of this there being some kind of zero sum worldview of this, that white people benefit from a certain power structure, and that if people of color were to benefit equally and were to be seen equally in the eyes of whatever institution we're talking about, then that would come at the expense of the people that already enjoy those privileges or those protections. And man, that you see that in almost everything the president says, and it's a real problem. It doesn't seem to me to be the way the world works. I mean, in sports, yeah, there's winners and losers, but this isn't sports. I don't see why everyone can't partake in the American dream, and even more widely, just globally. I don't see why that's not possible. It shouldn't have to come at anyone's expense.
Well, you would think. Although debunked by a historian friend of mine, one of the books that sort of brought to light why there's a disparity between these peoples was Jared, I can't remember his last name, Guns, Germs, and Steel.
Oh yeah, Jared Diamond.
Yeah. I think, as flawed as this book might be, particularly I was talking to a professor of Native American history, and he rolls his eyes at that book because he found it simplistic and such. But one of the things that I found incredible in that book is that people who needed to have steel developed steel, and people who needed to do great things with dyes and crops and stories and hunting and such, they did that. But the ones that developed the steel, the ones that became conquerors, and the conquerors could also identify their when they needed things done for them. They can identify at 30 yards, 30 hands away, a black person. So what greater um, what greater chattel could there be than having Africans as slaves? You can see them from a quarter mile away as different from who the white person would be, and that made for and they weren't smelting iron and such to defend themselves, because they really were defending themselves from each other max. They weren't having to go up against metal and swords and shields and guns and such. So
Right.
it wasn't that they were lesser in the eyes of a god that makes humans. They just did what they needed to do. But they were clearly in the eyes of those that were the purveyors of conquest, the conquistadors, matter of speaking.
Yeah.
They're an easy target. And that historically is what has happened. This is my mind speaking of. That is historically what has happened with people of dark races. They have been conquered by those of Northern European extraction, the ones that did the metal and had the long boats. They, that is how racism perpetuated itself, is through the leftovers of that conquest and imperialist thumb. So, with all that said, it's no wonder. Look, I knew people who knew slaves. I'm gonna let that thing sink in for a minute.
Wow.
I'm 51 years old, and I had a grandmother who died when I was 17, and she was 90. So that puts her having been born somewhere back in the 1800s. And you know what? I'm sure she knew somebody that was a slave, like definitely one of her cousins or somebody was a slave. Ain't no getting around that. That is formative stuff. That is within the last 150 years. That's not a long time.
So, it's funny. Go ahead, Vance.
The legacy, I'm just saying that based on that timeline, the legacy lives. It's not fixed overnight. I mean, we've done a damn good job. We have Colin Powell, we have Oprah Winfrey, and Barack Obama. Getting around it. A lot of great strides have occurred since. Legacy of slavery and the move to freedom in the 20s, the move north to the cities, that's recent. That's all recent. And the formation of ghettos and the couple of generations that people have been in ghettos, that bad things happen in a ghetto. Well, you know what? That's some recent shite.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's funny when you hear the word slavery in conversation these days. Depending upon the company, I think you might have a different kind of. You might place that word differently in historical context. I think to a lot of white people, when they hear the word slavery, it's like, well, that's something that we that used to happen, that was shameful, and we got rid of it because we fought the Civil War, and yada yada yada. When you put it like you just put it, of knowing someone who knew slaves, I mean, that's within the span of a couple lifetimes. That's no time at all. And I don't want that to, and I don't think he meant this to let us off the hook when it comes to like, well, how long this has been going on and how long we've been trying to reconcile it. but it's not that long a time. You also said something really interesting about the people that needed something, and so they developed it. Was it steel or something? It made me think about right now, because it seems like right now to me, like the thing that we need most um, is equality of some sort, so that we can have togetherness. Because I feel like right now the thing that's being done to America is this kind of divide and conquer, sort of bait and switch sort of thing, where we're being separated from each other. Um, it's happening digitally. It's happening in real life, and it makes it easier to say capture an election with a certain amount of electoral college votes or what have you. But it feels like the thing that is really going to save us, if anything, is going to save us, is this parity and this equality and this coming together that is going to have to involve some, call it a reckoning, whatever you want. There has to be some kind of reckoning that makes things, that begins to set things right and brings us together. Because if we're fighting each other, other forces come in, other people who, again, shall remain nameless from my lips. They swoop in and they try and get shit done. Things that people have been trying for many years, or things that were already fixed, and they come in and they remove the fixes, And it feels like I think that's the thing about this moment right now, this kind of, that's kind of coming to a head with this George Floyd thing, is this is the thing that we need right now. It's incredibly important for African Americans and for people of color and all that. But I would argue that it's really important for the entire American experiment. If we cannot get on a better path with this, I don't see how we fix the other things, like the country.
I was when I first started doing this singing thing, I didn't really sing in tune. I was gregarious. I was musical and fun and everything else, but I had to go back to get myself to sing in such a way that I was singing clearly, that I was singing in tune, on pitch. That was work. And it really meant going to a tune and going, "Starry, starry night," rather than what I would have done 30 years ago, "Starry, starry night," and I could gliss past those other notes. But when they were recorded, they sounded like dung. They were sprightly and they had, but musically it was not happening. And I had to force myself to start hitting notes. Some people come out of the gate doing that. They're like, you've heard them. You've heard children just go bing, 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 and they're hitting the notes, and you just go like, how is that possible? I was not one of them. I sing more in tune now from the sweat, the hardest of work. And that is where we are right now. The fact that you and I were sweating over a title for this today. Yeah. The fact that you and I were sweating a little bit, saying, like, how do we present this to this audience without looking like we're being pandering or being racist or being excessively negrophilic. That is the work. That is the hard work. And I'm going to say from back here, a certain amount of perspective, I'm so proud of that. I am proud of that with the white friends that I have, the ones that flail, even the ones that flail about like, oh my God, Vance, are you okay? You know how many "you okay" calls I got? I was like, you know what? It's, to me, that's really okay, because somebody is beginning to do the work. The ones that aren't doing the work that are like, well, it ain't no thing. I don't see color. Well, you know what? That's that's some of the most racist stuff that I could point my finger at. This other stuff in trying to, it's when you grapple in judo and you're grabbing the outfit. You're not trying to tear anything. It ain't gonna tear. So you got to grapple it and throw it around to get your job done. And that is what we are doing now. We're grappling, and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you and my white friends that are like you, that stumble about trying to figure out who and what black people are and what to say to them. You stumble on. You stumble like a mofo. You are the
I surely will.
Chinese food eating stumbler that I know. You stumble, Mark. Keep stumbling, because stumbling is important. You're not supposed to step up here and go, well, my ledger is whistle clean. We're all
Yeah, it's not. It's
men. We're men. Imagine the egregious things that we've done over our 46 and 61 years on this planet. Imagine the egregious.
Oh man, you're kind of breaking up on my
that we
end.
don't
Man.
even.
I don't know. It's a little suspicious, the timing of that freezing. I don't know. I could just tell that you were making a really good point there. Is there? Can you paraphrase really briefly?
Being men, and we don't even know as men the times we have been egregious to women. We don't even know all the time, and we are stumbling. We are all stumbling, but I think intent is the key that turns this engine over. That's at least.
You've probably heard a lot of people saying this, Vance. Maybe just to kind of come down the home stretch here. This has been the longest, but for me the most enjoyable one of these. You've probably heard a lot of people say a lot of this times out there right now. This time feels different, and on a lot of levels, I might agree with that. When you hear "this time feels different," does that resonate with you? Do you concur? Do you feel that way?
I don't. I guess I don't really have. I think it's more global. Yeah. I think our internet capability is making any and everything that happens that would have been more compartmentalized, makes it more global. I guess it feels different. Does it feel different than the Rodney King riots? Not entirely. There were cities that were kind of locked down and shut down during that time, and then there was the various riots when I was coming up. It doesn't feel that different to me, I guess. Not. I mean, I guess we'll see. We'll see.
Well, yeah, I think. I mean, it helps. It helps me to hear that, because it. Sometimes I feel like when I hear that phrase, this time feels different. It feels like kind of letting Jesus take the wheel or something, or like just kind of letting inertia, like it's going to go in the right direction. We got this. It feels like a little bit like coasting, and I feel like now is really the time that this stuff needs to be driven home. Even in the middle of a pandemic, maybe particularly in the middle of a pandemic, because for the first time in, I think, anyone who's alive now's life, almost everyone in the world is living in the same, in part of the same context. This coronavirus thing, it's everywhere. It's the first time we've ever had something like this globally. It may not be to the same extent everywhere, but it is a thing everywhere. And to that end, it feels like this weird thing to unite us or put us all on somewhat of the same page, but it feels like it's maybe pointed us all in the same direction, however briefly. And it feels like now is the time when we do have a little bit of common focus to kind of say, and while we're at it, not only do we need to defeat the virus, but we gotta deal with this other shit that the virus has exposed. We have to deal.
It's a swingable it's a swingable compass. You know, I think the first swing of this compass was again with the Me Too movement. I mean, that was that grab a hold and never let go. And I think the world took notice. That people stood up and took notice, and they couldn't help it because it wasn't something that would just die thanks to the newspaper's done with it. So therefore, it has and has had a life of its own. Then coronavirus, and now our struggle for equality. It is a movable lever at this point where people are empowered. I mean, there's all kinds of sides to that too, because you go to a Facebook or Twitter or Instagram feed and you see something that's so incredibly sexist or racist or something in your head, and then you look over at the number of hearts that were checked by, and I think that's for me, often that's the hardest thing, is how many angry, racist people are out there that just, well, the other side of this is X, Y, or Z. And it's like a wake-up call to a 61-year-old man that makes him seem like a 5-year-old with monsters under the bed. Guess what? They're out there. Mm. They're out there. And sorry.
Please.
They're out there. And it's scary to think that so many people that they can't, you click on it, you see the hearts and it doesn't even move. There's so many people that believe it. And that's the other side of everybody has a voice now.
Goes both ways, yeah.
It does, and it's that is the scariest thing for me, because they may not be on my block because I know this block, but they're the next town over somewhere. There's some, yeah. I thought in my little naive brain, I thought that, oh, we have just all but eradicated that kind of racism. But I'm sorry to tell you and your two boys, Marky, that they are out there. You have brushed past them in the supermarket. They have waved to your children. Mm. They're out there. And that's the spookiest I can think of.
Yeah, you know.
so what's the? Is there a war coming? Is there a revolution? And Gil Scott-Heron is wrong, man. Gil Scott-Heron, the revolution is televised. The revolution couldn't be more televised. It is on Twitter and on Instagram and Facebook and in an email in a second. Yeah. This moment televised.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing.
I think. Please don't ask me if I see a revolution coming.
Yeah,
Mark,
I won't do that.
Mark, don't ask me because I'm black, man.
Man, I see on the top of my screen here something I've never seen during ology before, which is that we have 1 minute and 40 seconds remaining. And I don't want this to get cut off before I am able to tell people that you have a new record out that they should check. They should definitely check your record out. But I also wanted to tell you how much I love you and thank you for doing this with me and being here with me today. I would want you here with me, and I would love you no matter what we're talking about. But in this stuff in particular, I can't thank you enough.
Same, Mark. There's so many things. There's singer-songwriter we can do another time. I could take you for a phone tour of my model airplane shop. We could talk about biology. We both have degrees in biology, Mark. You and I like twin mother brothers from different. We're like co-Italio Negroes is what we are, Mark. We don't cut us off, Instagram. Do not. Go ahead. Do you?
Well, man, again, it's great to see your face. I don't care what we're talking about, but today it was particularly great to see it. And let's do this again on something a lot more frivolous and just something different that we both share.
Love you like brother.
Love you, man. We're just gonna let this run out. We're at 4, 3, 2, 1.